on behalf of the Hanson Public Library and myself, thank you for coming and listening to my story about my book, It's a Beautiful Day to Save Lives. It is a memoir of my life, but it has a lot of purpose and passion and life lessons that I like to share with the world and the community. So I'm glad that you're here. Anybody read my book already? Here, anybody? No? Okay, perfect. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I do live in Hanson. I've been here I always correlate it to my oldest daughter's age. I've been here 19 years. I grew up in Norwell and traveled around the world and around the country and came back to the South Shore and have sort of grounded myself here with my family. I have 3 children, one who is in the high school. She's a junior, soon to be a senior. And I have twins that are 9, a boy, girl, that go to the Indian Head School right here in Hanson. So we've been here quite some time, but it still feels a little bit different to me because I feel like I'm always going north. And we live on East Washington Street, so we're very close to Hanover, so we always feel like we're headed in that direction. But we're, with our kids, we sort of have met some other families that we, hang out with and stuff. So it's a quaint little town. It kind of reminds me of Norwell when I was growing up because it is a little bit more quiet and a little bit more farmy and a little bit more spaced out, which is nice. But in any event, I'm a physical therapist by trade, 26 or 7 years here in the making. I'm still learning and trying to get better all the time. And I also am a veteran. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. And I'm also very blessed to own 110 Fitness, which is in Rockland, Massachusetts, which is the largest wellness center in the world for people with Parkinson's disease. It also happens to be an all-inclusive fitness center, so it is for people with any disability that you could imagine, whether it's a traumatic brain injury or a stroke, MS, concussions. We do a lot of work for disabled youth or disabled adults, and then we do a lot of programming for veterans, disabled veterans, and then we do programming for someone who may not have any disability at all that just might want to be a better version of themselves from a spiritual, physical, sort of emotional, if you will, perspective. We try to tie everything into our wellness center through the art of fitness. So I have a lot going on. One of the things that I always wanted to do was write a book. And I have always had ideas of what I wanted to write my book about. I'm working on my second book at this point, but the pandemic was a silver lining for me because I work so much. The pandemic gave me an opportunity to be still for periods of time. Our wellness center was closed for 4 months, like the rest of the world was. And being a physical therapist, I was able to work, which was nice because I was considered essential. So I was doing one-on-one appointments with people sort of in the heart of the pandemic at 110 Fitness and consequently designing some other things that I'll talk about. But the nice thing was every day I left at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, which was very early for me, and I was able to go home, and every night I would sit down and I would write a chapter of my book. And if you ever talk to any author, the most exciting part of writing a book is writing the book because the editing and the publishing and all of that stuff that goes along with producing the final product is a ton of back and forth with publishers and asking, you have to send multiple queries to see if you can find an editor or a publishing company that will pick you up that's interested in your book. And they get, thousands and thousands and thousands of requests from multiple people who are authors. So the process of writing the book is a wonderful experience, extremely therapeutic for me because mine is a memoir. So it sort of walked through my life from when I was a child all the way up until I am here today. And so the writing, like I said, is just a fantastic way to get everything on paper. It's very much like if any of you journal or do any type of writing about your life or where you're at in your life, whether you use a diary or things like that. The memoir is very much like that for me. And so it was just an awesome sort of gift for me to have to be able to spend all that time writing. The editing and the publishing, well, that was fun. But like I said, it'd be like, okay, you submit the job, you bring it back, do this, do that, But in any event, it came out, I think, very nicely. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I'm not going to ruin any of the surprises in my book, but the opening part of my book is a experience on a plane. I was flying to LA to visit a research company that I was doing research for FDA approval for a technological piece of equipment that we use to reduce tremor in Parkinson's. And it was a beautiful day, and it was sunny and gorgeous. I was leaving Logan on time, and there was a gentleman when we got into the air who was experiencing what most of us would consider a heart attack, and there was nobody with any medical experience on the plane. So my book opens up with this sort of impactful, explosive chapter of me on a plane at 30,000 feet, putting an IV in somebody and caring for them as they were experiencing what we thought is a heart attack, and landing fast, and the rushing of EMTs and firemen and security guards rushing this poor gentleman off the plane. And it's kind of just gets you hooked, that was my sort of, come see what we're going to write about. And then, the book flows from when I was 6, like I said, up until now, and what I've experienced in my life. And I could probably add a few chapters since I've written this. I released this a year ago in May. But all along my life, from 6 to 12 to college to the military, I kept being presented with situations where I had to save someone's life. And so my book is a series of chapters of all of these experiences. I spent 8 years in the military. I worked as a combat medic in special operations. So I have been a lot of places and done a lot of things and seen a lot of different injuries and experiences. I'm going to be 50 in August, so a lot of people try to correlate my service time. I was in the service I just missed jumping in Panama, but then Desert Storm came along and I was a part of that. But I also worked in special operations, so a lot of smaller missions that are confidential and things that we don't really talk about in the news. But I spent a lot of time in parts of Bosnia and Yugoslavia, Macedonia, Albania, and areas there during the Bosnian conflict, which lasted way too long. A lot of people have never heard about the Massacre of Sabranica, which is one of the worst massacres that ever occurred in the history of in the history of the world. And this was a massacre that occurred in Bosnia where almost 8,000 people were murdered within like 2 days, and men, women, and children. And it was the ethnic cleansing that was occurring in that region. But what happened from all of that conflict back in the mid to late 90s was, and this is very ironic as to what is occurring currently in Ukraine, is that families were displaced all over the world. Germany, Sweden, Macedonia. I mean, so some kids were here and their parents were here, and there were a lot of families that were kind of spread apart. And so one of the chapters I talk about in that whole thing is, during that conflict is, the military puts together, this is called the Special European Command, but what they do is they take special operation members from different parts of the world and they put them together to work together to sort of create sort of flow as to how to triage all of those things that are going on. Because most people in special operations speak multiple languages, it's a little easier for the groups to work together. And we then try to figure out how to mainstream all of that stuff to put everything back together. And so, a lot of people were actually shipped to the United States. They were kidnapped from their homes, safely kidnapped by U.S. soldiers, and they were taken to camps, very similar to what's going on in Ukraine and Poland. And then they were basically sent to different places. And a lot of people, and you'll read this in my book, were sent to the Bronx and parts of New York. So a lot of Bosnians still live in upstate New York. They have entire communities who have families who were displaced during the Bosnian conflicts. And my book does a full circle at the end And I don't want to ruin the surprise, but my time in Bosnia was very significant for me because, when you're working as a soldier, you always question whether or not you're doing the right thing. And for me, my entire time spent in Bosnia is justified almost 25 years later in my life. It comes full circle back to me in my last chapter, which is it's still mind-blowing to me when I read the chapter. But in any event, all of these chapters talk about these situations where, again, I was put in some form of position where I needed to rescue someone. And what happened for me personally was I started to accumulate all of that and all of the emotional struggles of humans that I was with, and being in war, and being in hospitals that were much less adequate than what you would see in the United States, and trying to find ways to help people. And it took its toll on me to the point where in my book, it will talk about where I need to be saved and my life needs to be saved. And obviously it was. And again, very, very lucky to have that happen. There were people in my life that you'll read about, but that emotional struggle and those very dark areas of my life brought me to addiction with alcohol and attempted suicide and lots of different places that I shouldn't have been. And in my book, I talk about when I got out of the service and I got married and I had my Isabel, who was my oldest, and I felt like if you ever go to the zoo and you watch the tigers and they pace back and forth in the cage because they have no place to go, right? This is how I felt. I was pacing back and forth in my life, and I was mad. I was so mad. And I didn't know what to do, right? I paced back and forth. But yet there was a part of me that was saying I should be so grateful for what I had. I had a beautiful house, I have my wife, I have a child, I owned a business, I had a couple cars, but I really had nothing. And so I was just kind of isolated in my own world and angry and resentful, and I didn't really know why. And that took me to a very bad place, as I said. And luckily for me, I was able to rebound from that with the help of professionals. I spent 2 years in therapy with a woman in Cambridge I went to see every week, and I paid her privately for a specific type of technique called tapas acupressure. And I met with her, and she saved my life. I went every week faithfully to her when I was on the road in my other business, and her name was Pat Thatcher, and we spent 2 years every week going through these tapas acupressure techniques and working through all the PTSD that I was experiencing from when I was young until the time that I was with her. And I'm in a fast track from that situation that my life turned around. And one of the things that I didn't know is I didn't know what to do with my life now that I was sort of back on track. I had my business, like I said, I had my things, which never mattered. But one thing that somebody told me is they said that if you're unsure about what you want to do, go and help somebody. And consequently, you'll be helping your community, and that will help the world. And my life was always helping people. I was a combat medic, I was a physical therapist, like that's what I did. But I really didn't understand what the depth of that helping and then that congregating and spreading through communities. And I was working full-time. I used to make custom wheelchairs and braces. And then I was doing a lot of fitness and personal training for people that had Parkinson's disease or who had injuries. And I kind of fell into this 110 fitness that I was telling you about earlier, which started out in Marshfield in a very small fitness center in a room a little bigger than this. And I had two people that started with me in a very small boxing program that I started because Leslie Stahl did this great special on 60 Minutes talking about her husband boxing in a gym in Brooklyn and that his symptoms were mitigating and they were starting to go away and slowing down. I was working in professional boxing, training some professional fighters while I was on the side while I was doing my regular work, and that sort of came to that. All of that stuff came together for me, and in about a month, we had about 25 to 30 people standing in front of me in this little fitness center in Marshfield, and about 30 caregivers in the back room having a mock support group. And at that point in time, I decided that this community needed something more than that. And serendipitously, I ended up, there was a boxer who I was training whose dad owned a building in Rockland. And he said, you know, if you ever want to think about doing your own thing, you should come see this building. My dad's getting ready to move his business out. And I went there over like a year, like 4 and 5 times, thinking there's no way I can pull this off, you know. Giant space, right? Like 6,000 square feet, lots of money. And our program in Marshfield continued to grow, and my other business was continuing to grow, so I was really busy. But I did. I jumped off the cliff and took on this space. And I spent about 3.5 months with some help with some friends building out this space. And, you know, it's kind of amazing where we're at now. Like I said, we're the largest wellness center in the world for Parkinson's disease. We do research. We do anything that you could ever think of. But instead of just boxing, we're now supporting caregivers, and we're supporting other people throughout the world and throughout the country through the fantastic technology that we have through Zoom and an app that I have developed for Parkinson's wellness. And so my journey to 110 Fitness is in my book. But the biggest message that I get across in my book is talking about how everybody has greatness and that everybody also has a very special gift that is given to you, and that through helping others in your community that you can recognize what that gift is. And when you recognize what that gift is, it is your responsibility to share that gift with people. And also, you know, I don't use this quote in my book, but one of my biggest quotes when I talk is, too much is given, much is required. And that is a little blip out of the story of Luke in the Bible. But what it means is that if you are given something, it is required for you to share that with your community, and again, to make the world a better place to live, and to be surrounded by those people that you're using your gift with. And so that is sort of the purpose of my book, and the story is, you know, lots of situations in my life, you know, my roller coaster, but coming back to the surface and coming up for air, and then recognizing really what my sort of the rest of my life should be, and through grace and a lot of other hard work, you know, I think I found that. And so I share that in my book, and I share it every day in my work, and I try to share that message with anybody that I come in contact with. So I didn't ruin too many surprises. So what I like to do is I certainly love to open up to questions. If anybody has questions of anything, it doesn't have to necessarily correlate to my book. It can be about my work or what I do, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Tell us about your honeybees.
My honeybees, yes. So this is a great question. So one of the things that I do is I am a mentor to veterans who suffer from PTSD for a group called Hives for Heroes. What we have found is through some research that was done in the University of Vermont, that through the art of beekeeping, the mindfulness of that actually helps people, soldiers, transitioning from military to civilian life, and also involves their families, that it helps them. And if you are a beekeeper like I am, when you are standing there with 180,000 bees, your focus is very acute, right? not because you're frightened. It's an amazing thing to watch nature in perfection. And when you open up that hive and you see just thousands of bees working and creating and making these perfect hexagons, and this one's doing this, and this was there is an element of focus and almost a calming effect that occurs while you're there. And so I sponsor other soldiers who have PTSD, and they beekeep with me. And my goal is throughout a year of beekeeping is then to transition them to have their own hive. And so this is a big program. It's a national program that I belong to, started by a soldier like myself who had some struggles, and he's in Texas. And he reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, listen, can you help us? We heard about your great work up in New England, and we'd like you to be a part of this, because the beekeeping world, even though it seems large, it's actually quite small." So I keep bees, and I sell my honey at 110 Fitness, and I enjoy it. Actually, I am going to see my bees on Saturday. I keep a hive at my house, but I keep multiple hives at other farms. For people who have apple trees, or they might have things that they want pollinated. So I keep my bees there, and I, in exchange, give them honey for allowing me to do that. So yeah. So again, it's I am using a hobby to give service back to the community of soldiers who need help. So. I have a lot of hours in my day. I work a lot. But I will tell you this, because everybody asks me that question. They ask me when I sleep. I'm usually in bed by 9 o'clock every night, 9:30 at the latest. I put my kids to bed, and then I go to bed. And I sleep very well. And I get up about 4:30, because I'm usually at work about 5:30 at the latest every day. And in the morning, I go to work. I usually start work at about 6 o'clock, but I try to get to work on time because I meditate in the morning and I journal. And sometimes I even exercise before I start work because I know that is what I need to keep my cup half full instead of half empty. But I do work a lot. My family is very involved in 110 Fitness. My kids come to all our community events. They come to our parties. They come and work out at 110 Fitness sometimes. And so it's nice. My wife is a nurse, so she understands that whole healthcare process. And, she's an integral part as well, even though she works. But yes, but that's my commitment that I have to do, that I recognized through my work, is that I was given another chance. And so that chance I have to give back, and I have to stay committed to that always. And that keeps me very focused.
But it sounds like you've actually incorporated all the different parts of your life together.
Correct.
So,
yeah, I try to keep it very balanced. My family's number one. My kids are very important to me, and I have great kids. I can't say enough about my children, and that's definitely, as much as my wife's fault as it is my fault. But it's just easy, because I make sure that it's balanced. It's not always balanced. I mean, life on life's terms, right? So yeah, but I do work a lot. Yes, I'll be honest with you. Yeah. Does anybody else have questions?
Well, I know you said that you, at your fitness center, you treat different disabilities, but in particular Parkinson's. Was there any particular reason why that one disability?
Yeah, and there's a little bit in my book about this, but like I said, I was training professional boxers, and I have not. And come on in. Yeah, how are you? I have stepped away from that in the last 2 years just because I am too busy. But I have trained world champion professional fighters, and I'm still in the boxing world. The boxing world is very small, but I'm just not cornering, or they call it cutting, the guy that fixes all the cuts. Yeah, I haven't cut in a long time. But the research that came out after the whole Leslie Stahl special at 60 Minutes, there was a 10-year research program that was done on boxing and Parkinson's disease. And what they found is, the United States Olympic Committee came out with a research study that said that boxing is the hardest sport in the world. They took 7 categories: mental aptitude, strength, range of motion, agility, endurance, and they graded them all based on every Olympic sport, and boxing was number 1. Second was hockey. And so with that data, they then did a high-intensity boxing program with people with Parkinson's, non-contact, right? So you would train them just like a professional fighter minus the contact. So speed bags, heavy bags, double end bags, mitt work, if you're familiar with that, where the coach holds up the mitts and the boxer punches the mitts at a certain pace count, and there's all kinds of names for different punches and numbers that correlate to them. And what they found was that all of these people were getting better. Their symptoms were mitigating, they were coming off of some of their medications, or some of them for the 10 years stayed exactly the same. And with a neurological progressive disorder like Parkinson's disease, we see progression, right? These people were not having progression over the course of 10 years. They were staying the same, which is a huge plus. So here I was training people with Parkinson's disease at home, working in professional boxing, and after the whole collision of 60 Minutes, and I talk about this in my book, 4 families called me the day after and said, "Brett, did you watch 60 Minutes last night?" And I said, "No, I don't watch TV." And they said, "Well, I'm hoping you can help my dad." "Well, I'm hoping you can help my mom." And I was like, so I went onto YouTube and I watched the Leslie Stahl special. And I looked into boxing certifications for Parkinson's disease. And I flew out out to Indiana, and I got my certification. And I came home and I started this program. And that was 5 years ago. And like I said, we started with 2 people. And pre-pandemic, we're running anywhere between 100 to 150 people with Parkinson's disease through our program in a week. So I do a lot of one-on-one training, and then we do a lot of large group trainings based on progression. So we have multiple different classes based on the progression of the disease when those folks come into 110 Fitness. So, did that answer the question? Yeah. So that's how it all happened. It just kind of, it was meant to be. Really, this is meant to be, yeah. Any other questions?
And maybe you could just talk about, you said you're writing a second book.
Yeah, so I am. I'm writing a second book, and it's my life without Parkinson's. Working with Parkinson's people is really kind of neat. I have this famous saying that says the coolest people get Parkinson's, because all the people that I've met that have come through my doors with Parkinson's disease have the neatest stories, and they are like the coolest people. And I listen to like what they may have done for a job previously, or where they've traveled all over the world, or one of them has done this, or another one has done that. And so I have a collection in my head of all kinds of things that I've experienced working with Parkinson's disease over the last 5 years, because I've really been chest deep and embedded for that period of time. I was in it before that. To also finish answering your question, Karen, we lost my aunt to Parkinson's disease. So we have a family member who died of Parkinson's disease, or with Parkinson's disease, I should say. But there's a lot of special things that have happened, and so I am writing a book that talks about my life. Well, I don't have Parkinson's disease, but what my experience has been with people with Parkinson's disease. And so there are chapters that are dedicated to individual people that I have met, but then there's also chapters dedicated to other things. There's a lot of funny things that happen when you work with people with Parkinson's disease. There's also a lot of not so funny things that happen with Parkinson's disease. One of the things that I get to do, which is a blessing and maybe not so much, is I lose fighters, right, who pass on from the progression of the disease, and something may happen and they die. And so I always am called by families, and I make last visits like a priest. I go to these people's homes and I spend time with them while they're still alive. Some of them may be in the process of passing on, and I spend time with their families and I spend time with them. And so, that's definitely something that I want to write about and talk about, because there's something very special that happens when that happens for me and I make those visits. It's also very honorable for me to be invited by these families. And so there's a lot of stuff that I talk about in this book. And I think it will be fun. And I'm in the beginning stages. I've broken down the chapters and just kind of chicken scratched, because now I'm back in the throttles of work. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting for people to understand really what goes on, not only at 110 Fitness, but also what goes on in a coach's mind who doesn't have a disease, who is treating people with a disease. So one of the chapters also will be about, it took me almost 50 years to break a bone. I've lived a very dangerous life, and you will probably read about it. No, in all honesty, I've lived an extremely dangerous life, and I probably shouldn't be here. But I broke my leg in 3 places 10 weeks ago, and I had surgery. So I was able to have my first ever overnight stay in a hospital, my first ever surgery, and my first ever broken bone. But I... as mentally frustrated, I will be open and transparent with you that I am, because I cannot move. How humbling it is for me to recognize how hard it is for everybody with Parkinson's to move. When I first broke my leg, I was getting up at 4 o'clock to get to work at 6:30, because I had to hobble down the stairs on my crutches and lay everything out, and I had to sit in a shower chair and wrap my leg in saran wrap and going through this, and I had to inject myself with Lovenox so I wouldn't blood clot, and trying to then move at work, and then trying to be that person that I am when I'm not well, and so and I'm still continuing every day. I'm it reminds me, all the damn medicine. I've taken more medicine in the last month than I've taken in my entire life. But what people with Parkinson's do is they take medicine every day, all day, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 pills. Because if they don't, they can't move. And that's what happened to me. If I didn't take my ibuprofen, I couldn't walk. So this will definitely be included in my next book, this humbling experience and it's just a broken leg. It's temporary. Parkinson's disease is not temporary, and how grateful I should be. So the leg will be a chapter for sure. I'm learning a lot of life's lessons, and it's not that I don't teach with compassion, and it's not that I'm not fully empathetic to the folks that come through the doors of 110 Fitness, but this gives me a really great experience firsthand, a little bit more than my compassion. So yeah, so that's the next book. Yes?
You may have mentioned something about this earlier.
Sure.
I missed it.
No, not at all.
Something you just said reminded me, is there a time period where someone comes in, typically how long do they stay, and then what's the impact on their, it's probably better mentally than it is physically, but what's the impact on them that they feel and is noticeable, and that whole, how long that span?
So there's a lot of questions in there. So let me just tell you the process. First of all, it's extremely hard to walk through the door when you have Parkinson's disease, for anybody to cross our threshold. It takes a long time for a lot of people to get to our facility. And I always use the cliche of the people that are already at 110 Fitness are running with buckets of water to the door for the people that are coming through that are on fire, because they want to put them out and pull them in. What I teach and what I preach at 110 Fitness is not only helping yourself, but then giving back to others. Once you start to get yourself a little bit straight with your Parkinson's, it's then your job to be of service to everybody else that walks through the door. That's one thing that we do, and we support each other. And organically, what has happened in 110 Fitness is that we have become this giant family. And it's not just the people with Parkinson's disease, it's their families, it's their kids, it's their grandkids. They're all intertwined into 110 Fitness on some level. And so the camaraderie and that family piece of it is huge. I can't research it, I can't touch it, but I know that I lost 8 people in the pandemic, and none of them died of Parkinson's disease. I think they all died of loneliness. Dead honest. Because there was nothing wrong with them when the pandemic started. And then people just passed away. And I think that they progressively just crashed because they didn't have a place to go. They didn't have people to talk to. They didn't have their friends, their family, a place to be accountable and responsible to go to. So without studying it, the value of camaraderie and friendship with a incurable disease, I think, is huge. Everybody that walks into our facility typically gets a tour of our facility, and then they watch a class to see if it's something that they want to do. And if it is something that they want to do, I meet with them for about an hour to an hour and a half doing a thorough evaluation, which includes technology and measurements and reflex times and all this physical therapy stuff. And what it does for me is being an industry expert, is it allows me to then say, if you want me to optimize your performance, and you want to have great outcomes and live a wonderful life with Parkinson's disease, this is what I think you should do. And I sit down with my schedule and I say, you should take these classes. And then I think you should eat this way. And this is what I think about your sleep and your hydration. And do you have a support system? Do you live alone? Do you need some help? We have resources. So that's what I do within that first visit. And then they start to come to our classes, whether it be a drumming class, a cycling class, a Tai Chi class, a yoga class, a boxing class, a mindful meditation, an educational series, a support group meeting. They come on some level to be involved, to sort of get their feet wet, if you will, and to kind of see what's going on and how they can help themselves. Based on all the research that either I've done, so I do research directly at 110 Fitness for the big foundations. So I do research for Michael J. Fox Foundation. I do research for the Davis Phinney Foundation. I do research for Mass General. I do research for Cleveland Clinic. And all of that research is very different. Like 2 years ago, we did a study on cycling, and we looked at voice, and we looked at volumes. And we found that people that cycled 3 days a week at certain RPMs, their expiratory forces or their speech volumes increased and their falls at home decreased. So it might be a study like that. Then we did a study comparing Tai Chi and golf. What's better for dynamic balance for people with Parkinson's disease? And then we've done a bunch of other different studies with technology and things like that. But what we know from all the data and the research is that people get better, people maintain their symptoms, or we've had people who have stopped taking certain medications. But what we do know for sure is that nobody gets worse. We know that people don't get worse if they continue to stick to the research. Every program that's in 110 Fitness is a research evidence-based program, so there's data that shows that it works. Otherwise, we won't host it. And so, to answer your question, those are the things that we know. Is based on the data and the research that if people show up and they do it the way that it's laid out, and I always say to everybody, just like life, if you commit yourself to it and you want to get better at something and you practice and you focus and commit to it, the outcomes are going to be good, right? And so in regards to your question about retention, most everybody that's ever come has never left. And anybody that has ever left has either passed away or has moved or something has happened that was impactful in their life where they weren't unable to come. It's not your January crew, at your regular gym where everybody comes with all their intentions and then March it's empty, This might save your life, I tell people. This could save your life. And anybody that has ever passed on, their families, I hear the exact same sentence every time. And they always come to me after and they say, we're so grateful to 110 Fitness. And it's not me, it's all the people that are involved. Because I think my dad lived so much longer because of your program. Or my mom lived so many more years than sitting at home isolated in a wheelchair, which is what she would have done for the last 4 years. So we're adding years to life, and we're adding life to years at 110 Fitness, which is significant. And I see it every day. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Anybody else? Questions? Book, 110 Fitness, life, military. Okay. Awesome. Well, again, on behalf of the library and also myself, thank you for coming and listening. And my book is here. I donated a copy of my book here. If you'd like to take it out, I looked last week, and it was out, which is great. And I did sign it to whoever the reader may be. There's a nice little note in the open cover for you, and enjoy it. And my biggest thing is if you do take the time to read my book, it's very quick. First of all, it's probably take you 2.5 hours if you're a decent reader, and your goal is to then share it with somebody you know that it might help. So that's your job after you read my book. So, thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Cool. If anybody wants to buy a copy, obviously you're welcome. I also have some stuff here that talks a little bit about my book. You can download it on Amazon. I will tell you that we are this close to having the audio book come out. So it'll be available, again, on Amazon and any of the audio book apps that you can get if you want to listen. I did not read my own book. I cry all the time when I read my book. No, I'm dead serious. I do. I cry all the time when I read my book. And I've read my book 1,000,000 times, and I still go back to it many times. But so I had someone read it for me. He's a famous Boston radio person who has a really great voice, and knows me pretty well and understands what I was trying to get across. So his diction and grammar is very good. I'm just doing the final edit because you have to obviously check all those things. So that will be out probably in a couple weeks. It's a beautiful datasavelives.com is my website. You can go right on there and stay in tune with what's going on. So awesome. Great. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.